everyone. My name is Judy Amina, the Executive Director of the Kenya SRHR Alliance. Welcome to a special session of the EDS Corner. And this time I'm going to be joined by my friend Anne from the Pleasure Project.
Hi, Judy.
Hi. Hope you can introduce yourself.
So I'm Anne Philpott. I'm the founder of the Pleasure Project, and I'm delighted to be here and be working with the SRHR Alliance, who is the Africa Pleasure Hub. So the source of all things pleasure in Africa. Thought leadership, tools, projects,
materials, resources, and hopefully over time also research for evidence.
And experts, well, and trailblazers.
Yes. And as you've heard, we are doing some amazing work around pleasure, just in the region, trying to create more knowledge to connect people around Africa on the conversations around pleasure and how that fits into our work, also fits into our lives. Interesting, yeah. And how long have you been doing the work around pleasure and being a pleasure activist?
So I started the Pleasure Project out of pure frustration 20 years ago. We just had our 20th year anniversary.
Happy birthday.
I started it because I was working in HIV prevention and safer sex promotion. And I was learning loads of really amazing skills from people who negotiate safer sex every day. So I was living in Sri Lanka at the time, so with sex workers working there, but also in the workshops I was doing for condom promotion. And and they were talking about how we were together working out conversations that were eroticizing condom use, that were making it something of foreplay. And then I went to a global AIDS conference, and I was really super excited because I'd never been to one before.
Okay.
And I was like, wow, this is really the thing. Now I'm going to a global AIDS conference. And I was really shocked by how little conversation of sex there was, and how, you know, if I'd been coming from outer space and landed at that conference, I wouldn't have known that it was a conference that was about sexually transmitted infections. It was that people were acting as if it's airborne infections. And I think I said, this is enough's enough. Like, we need to talk about why people have sex, and pleasure is arguably the key reason people have sex around the world. And yet the sexual health world sort of ignores the sex bit, makes it very biomedical, and basically sexual health and sex education is kind of the death, danger and disease narrative. So I just really wanted to kind of burst that bubble and actually start having these conversations about pleasure. And it was quite scary to stand up and start saying, oh, we need to talk about pleasure, and to have the first panel of the Pleasure Project. But so many people came, and so many practitioners, and they were so enthusiastic and said, you know, also for them it was like a light bulb moment, right? Why are we not talking about the actual way that the diseases are communicated, and why are we not celebrating?
I started my first introduction to the Pleasure Project and to aspects around pleasure and the work that we did was in 2016. No, 2018 actually, when we were doing a research called the Pleasure Measure. And we did that in Kenya and in Ghana together with the Pleasure Project and Progress. And we are looking at the curriculums that we have, how much content on pleasure they do or they contain, the peer educators that work with the project, teachers that provide this sex education, how much enlightened are they and what kind of positivity do they have. And at that time, I of course noticed that I also had my own personal biases. I wouldn't have known. And that's because even with the work that we do, even as reproductive health experts and practitioners, the programs we implement, they already come from a level of we are trying to prevent teenage pregnancies, maternal deaths, STDs, infections and all that. So even in the way that we think and the way we put that down on paper, it's all about prevention. I never thought about it in the aspect of joy. For what reasons? It didn't bring the outcomes that we wanted for the program. So the way we design the programs have specific outcomes, and nothing like joy or looking at personal well-being or positivity happens to be there. And so that has shifted over time since engaging in that project, in that research. Of course, I saw the need of having more conversations that encourage positivity and celebrate sex and also love in that aspect, without looking at it from the lens of we just want to get certain outcomes from this project. Have you also experienced that, any shift from personal biases or personal opinions to something else?
If I look back on why I started the Pleasure Project, it wasn't just that moment of going to the AIDS conference, it was also my experience of having not great sex education at school. I think I was saying yesterday, my sole sex education at school was my biology teacher in an all-girls school, who told us all, and we were very, very excited to hear, that aspirin could prevent pregnancy. And we were like, wow, this is amazing information. And then he said, take an aspirin, put it between your knees and hold it there, and that's going to prevent pregnancy.
So you won't open your legs again. That's what.
And then we saw a video of a woman giving birth and a couple of girls fainted. That was it, right? So I think it probably started from there, but I also, as a young person, worked with young people and ran a sex education project. And one of the things that we all concluded as young people is we were only ever asked about what went wrong, or said, why didn't you use a condom? Nobody ever asks, rarely does a young person get asked, why did you use a condom? And they might say, oh, we needed to have a safe space, or we needed to have a locked room, or we needed to have this, and so, you know, the positives of actually using a condom, rather than always kind of shaming people or you know, making them feel bad about what are our natural desires. And it's so different from the way that I guess a personal revelation for me was it's pleasure integrated sex education is so different from other types of education. So when we teach young people to drive a car or cook food, we say, this is going to be amazing, you're going to be independent, you're going to produce wonderful things, or you're going to... So I guess the other thing that's really profound for me in another way is I've learned more about the history of pleasure in different contexts. So often people might say, and it's a myth, that, you know, pleasure's not in our culture, or it's new in our culture, or it's European, which is really, really not true. And I've learned more about how there's a long history of sex-positive approaches, either in different cultures, in pre-colonial Africa. There's a wonderful resource that the Africa Pleasure Hub's produced, which is about practices and narratives of pleasure in different contexts in Africa, and I loved reading that, but also how we're building on a long history, but that it's just been in the last couple of centuries, more recently, that, for example, you know, the very sex-negative British colonialism put a whole kind of lens or cover on top of what were long histories of pleasure and sex positivity and community education. And so that has been one of the things that's been really profound for me, is learning about that history in different regions.
Sessions were always packed. So the interests, I think that also really stands out. There's a lot of interest and enthusiasm from people to learn more about pleasure and how to integrate it in their day-to-day work and also in their lives. And so this is something that is not necessarily taboo anymore. I think more and more people are opening up to it, and we are happy to guide, we are happy to provide resources and to be able to do this and work together. I think one of my most profound takeaways when we did the research, we spoke to peer educators, we spoke to teachers, we spoke to even other civil society organizations. But the assumption was that teachers might not necessarily be very open to talk about sexuality education to young people. And now, in fact, around pleasure, they might not, we thought there's no way, they don't want to talk about this. But we were actually surprised that there were several teachers who were quite positive. They are willing. They give very important analogies such as sugar, telling a child that sugar is bad, and then when they taste sugar, they'll find out it's great, and they'll think you're a liar, really, and they'll do their own thing. And so they gave great analogies and why they think it's important to include pleasure in sexuality education. And from that time, we've tried to work with CSC facilitators, but it's still not enough. I think if we had more resources, more toolkits, more guidance at the education level that they would use, maybe it would also give us a better progress, or we'll see more progress. But the fact that there are CSC facilitators, there are teachers who are willing, I think that's a very beautiful thing that I have taken away from all this. But before we close this, I'd like us to think about the future of pleasure. So I'll just ask her prompt the future of pleasure is, and then we can give.
Wow.
Should I give a minute for us to think about it?
You start.
I start. Okay. The future of pleasure is Africa.
The future of pleasure is that every sexual health intervention is pleasure integrated, and that if it isn't, people will be asking questions.
Oh, that's really nice. I have to add another one.
Okay, you can do another one.
The future of pleasure is bold.
Well, after all of the amazing sessions at this conference, the future of pleasure is bold and fun.
Yes, bold and fun. So combined together, it's the future of pleasure is bold and fun. We got it.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, and all the best to us in this one. Yeah.